Mortgage forbearance. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but much like a night out that gets a little out of control and ends up with drinking one too many, a lot of people who took mortgage forbearance are now experiencing a hangover and waking up to the unpleasant reality that their bank and their mortgage servicer are not really interested in giving them an easy path back to performing status. Hi, my name is John Fazio. I'm a foreclosure defense attorney, and in this video, we're going to cover three topics. First, we're going to talk about if you're one of the roughly 3 to 4 million single-family households, representing about 7% to, in some areas like New Jersey, 10% of all the households in the nation who took advantage of the mortgage forbearance and put a pause on their mortgage payments during COVID. What do you do now to make sure you get your mortgage back in performing status and so you don't go into foreclosure? Two is we're going to give a little context for how we got into this problem and why the banks and their servicers are being so difficult, and hopefully to demystify a little bit why you're finding yourself facing this particular problem when the marketing of and the government propaganda that went out to encourage people that this mortgage forbearance, CARES Act forbearance was available and safe, right? That was what they were telling people. They said, this is a safe program. Don't worry. You can do this. You'll be able to get back on track. Why did you hear that at the time? And why are you finding out now that you're in a big problem that you weren't expecting to be in? So we're going to get that context and explain to you why this is happening. And then lastly, we're going to explain why, if you follow the approach that I said number one, why there's a particular strategy for getting your mortgage back into good standing that has a much greater chance of success and why you should go in that direction. Okay, so 3.4 million households, 7% of the country, did the mortgage forbearance, and a lot of people kept money on the side and saved or got some government help, and then they just simply, when the forbearance was over, whether they did the 6 months or 18 months, they just paid up the mortgage so that they were back 100% in good standing. But, you know, the statistics on the mortgage forbearance show that many of those people already had really strong, good loans and good credit profiles, which is why they got those loans that were already government guaranteed to begin with. And so the government had a lot of power to force the lenders that have the subsidized government loans to also provide a lot of relief to those people who didn't have the ability to just catch up on their payments. So the people who needed help the least, who already were in pretty good shape, managed to do all right coming out of the mortgage forbearance. No surprise here. Everybody that had a private loan where the government did not have the ability to force them to do whatever the government program said, who had higher interest rates, who were dealing with much more profit-focused commercial enterprises, are the ones that are watching this video. No, you're in good company. You are somebody who most likely had a private loan and did not have, maybe this is not your first home. Maybe you couldn't qualify for an FHA, or your income is such that you're not in the group that's getting some of these different HUD programs. But you still have to keep your home, right? And you're in this conundrum where you went into this thinking that it was going to be a piece of cake to come out on the other side and stay current on your loan, and now you're making call after call to the servicer asking for updates because you've applied to modify your loan, and they're saying that you're missing documents, that you don't qualify because of your income, which is befuddling because you may have more income than you did before when you were making the payments. Or they're saying that we can't lower your payment in order to qualify you, which is actually like a code for the net present value that they were expecting, the ROI that they're expecting to get on this product, this loan, would be altered by the getting paid later and deferring some of the payment into the future such that it no longer fits our credit profile, even though you're perfectly capable of making the payments you were making before. And so that's why they're pushing you towards a repayment plan where you catch up and you pay 1.5 or 2 times what you were paying. And who among us doesn't want to pay twice as much on our mortgage every month? And who among us doesn't have the ability to pay 1.5 times what we were already paying on our mortgage before COVID? As if we had a rising tide that raised all boats, and every single month we made more money than the month before. We never had any expenses that we weren't expecting. So now's a good time to segue, right? If you are in this situation, what do you got to do? What you have to do is you have to be meticulous about understanding what programs are available that your lender offers. So if all they offer is a repayment plan, well, you've got a problem, because that lender is not going to really be willing to do much for you, and you've got to go out and get a lot of money together, or you've got to refinance. If your lender does have modification options, is your loan in a government program or not? You got to figure that out so that you know what you might qualify for. Most of the people that are in trouble, their loan is not in a government program, because the government programs offer various partial claims and deferral options, and you had to be reviewed for certain things that the private lenders a lot of times do not offer. So understand what modification options are available, and ask a lot of questions of the servicing personnel and the point of contact about how they evaluate customers for those options. And if you are not an expert in this area, if you're not a financial advisor or an attorney that deals with mortgages, then I'd recommend to you that it might be a good idea to get somebody on your team to help you with this that actually has that experience, because it can be very confusing to try to understand this world of mortgage lending. And in the mortgage lending world, they try to weed out the customers that are not going to pay them in full over time and are not going to help them with their ROI and keeping a high percentage of performing assets on their books. So they already have made the decision as soon as you stop paying, even though they don't tell you this up front. They tell you how they're going to work with you, they're going to help you, but they've already made the decision that you're one of the loans that they don't want to keep on their books. So you're fighting an uphill battle to convince them to do that. And you have to make sure that you don't waste time and go down a lot of dead-end streets where I have clients that come in and they say, well, I wanted to see if I could get like a 2% interest rate. And I say, okay, well, in the current environment, the best most of these banks are doing is 3.5%. So why did you pick that hill to die on? Or they want the interest, they want to have a balloon that's a non-interest bearing balloon for the arrears. And I say, well, there's other structures that this bank does, but they don't have that option, because that would, again, impact the way that they have their portfolio of assets. Their investor doesn't permit that. Did you ask them if that was something that they actually did? And they'll say, no, but I've been trying to negotiate with them. Well, you can't negotiate with someone for a price or a product that they don't offer, right? So you have to make sure that you're aiming at a target that actually exists, that you can actually hit, and not one that they're just, it's dead on arrival. And then you have to make sure you understand exactly what's needed to qualify for that particular thing. So if it's a hardship modification, you have to have the hardship and the ability to now pay demonstrated, and you have to have evidence of both, and you have to have all of your ducks in a row and all of your documents in order. So you're trying to aim very specifically at a target that the bank has on the wall, and you're trying to hit right in the bullseye. That's the way to get your loan modified. And then there's a series of other options that you can try if that fails, but that's the most high percentage chance that you're going to get this done. But why is this happening? Why are we having people coming out of forbearance that are not being offered loan modifications? Some that are not being offered reasonable repayment plans, that don't have any ability to defer the accrued arrears on their loan, or are just being ignored altogether. Well, 7% of all the households in the United States took advantage of CARES Act forbearance. Then by February of 2021, about a year ago, year and 6 months at this point, 18 months ago, about 5% were still in the forbearance, and then the forbearance ended about a year ago. So people now are working their way to the point where they're getting nervous because they're about to go into foreclosure if they can't work something out. But there were 3 reasons why we ended up in this situation. The first one is that the government came in with the CARES Act and they said, hey, everybody's allowed by federal law. We're going to put this out there. You can put a pause on your payments. You can have a payment holiday because we don't know where this whole COVID thing is going. Great. That was very nice of them to do that, but it created a huge problem. The problem is that the federal government can't tell Chase Bank and Wells Fargo what to do. They can call them in for congressional hearings. They can do a lot of things. They can regulate them. They can make sure that they're not defrauding the public, but they're going to try to defraud the public. So in some cases, there will be bad actors that will do it anyway. What they can't do is they can't tell them to just lose money. They can't say, hey, by the way, you have to take these people and put them back in good standing on their loans and extend the maturity dates of the loans out 10 years and reduce the interest down to bargain basement rates. Because there's something called the contracts clause in the Constitution, and also it just would not be equitable to tell these private actors who are required to maximize shareholder value by earning a profit and having a high PE ratio, that they have to do the opposite of what they're required to do by the fiduciary and other duties that apply to corporate managers and directors. Because of that, the government had the power to put this stop order in place on payments, but they didn't have the power to make these private participants do something particular afterwards. Very similar to what happened with HAMP during the financial crisis. Second thing is the bank's perspective is, okay, we have these loans, we have a certain time horizon, and if we extend that, we're not going to make the same ROI as what we expected to make on an annualized return basis. So the bank really doesn't like the normal thing that a homeowner thinks would just make a lot of sense. Hey, I'm going to start paying again, and it'll take a little longer to pay off the loan, but everything's going to be the same as it was before. The bank says, hey, wait a minute. You already eliminated all of the ROI that we had on the loan because we were expecting to have earned the interest and you didn't pay the principal, so we're behind now instead of ahead. And then it's going to take like 6 or 7 more years before the ROI starts to turn back where we want it. We'd rather just get this off our books and make a new loan. And so from the bank's perspective, which is very numbers driven, they look at charts, they look at spreadsheets, they make mathematical models. This does not work. Last thing, third thing, bank servicers. You're talking to this point of contact at the bank. And this is a person that is usually, an entry-level employee, maybe 3-4 years of experience. There are some that are more experienced. But they also don't have any decision-making authority. So there's an underwriting department above them. And then above them, there are certain executive branches within the bank. And then there's the external-facing stakeholder, which is sometimes an investor. If the servicer that's doing the underwriting review is not actually the decision maker and it has to be approved based on guidelines from an external party, a trustee like U.S. Bank or some other hedge fund manager or somebody might have the ultimate say in whether or not it's in their business judgment the best thing to do to approve your modification. So the government doesn't have the power to tell private industry what to do. The banks do not want to or have a financial vested interest in doing what you think makes sense in their eyes. The way that they look at the world, it's a very bad thing. It's not a good thing. So they only want to do it if they really have to. And then they'll do it, holding their nose and with their teeth gritted. And third, you're not dealing with a decision maker who you can negotiate with like the way you could negotiate with me if we were talking. You're dealing with a hierarchical organization, and they've set it up so that the people that you're discussing this with, who are trained to be very compassionate and to put you at ease and have you take a step back and not get aggressive on getting the modification approved, those people lack the authority to give you what you want and they may not have all the information on how frequently the bank provides this relief and how to get it done. And it's a bureaucratic situation that they've put in place to block you from getting to the end, and to also be a further sieve to weed out those people who are really the most creditworthy of the bunch who have gotten behind, and to get the rest off of their books and put more roadblocks in their way to prevent them from getting to the finish line. All right, so we talked about the strategy of being meticulous and trying to hit the target right in the bullseye, and knowing exactly what type of relief you're going for, and then educating yourself or having your professional educate you on whether you qualify. And it's going to depend on your particular financial situation. We talked about how come the banks are denying people coming out of forbearance for loan modifications and other relief that would allow them to maintain their homes and have a home retention option. Last thing we want to do is your strategy. So if you're sitting there a little overwhelmed, 18 months of forbearance, big numbers on the books that you owe, that you got to catch up, and then your mortgage payment is already tough to make as it is. Most people in the country, something like 70-something% of the people in the country who are in the middle tier are living paycheck to paycheck. So if that's you, then or maybe you have some money left over, you're doing a little better than average, but you still are not having double, triple the amount of your mortgage left over every month, then what you need to do is probably get some help. You need to find a professional that you can work with, whether it's an attorney, which is probably the better option in a lot of cases, or like a financial analyst or somebody in the financial industry. You need some help to make sure that you don't make any mistakes, because there is a time limit before you actually end up in foreclosure. And so you need, the best thing that you can do is to have somebody with the experience of having done this for many years to guide you through the process and make sure you don't make any mistakes, and also to let the bank know that you're taking this very seriously and you're going to fight it, and either they're going to work with you or you're going to have to fight it till the end. If they know that, there's a much higher likelihood that they'll put you in the category of cases that has some litigation hazards and that they're going to get it off their plate. If you're in this situation, my heart goes out for you. This is a problem that was caused by a government program that was, rolled out with the best of intentions, and people unwittingly ended up ensnared in the problem of how do I pay my mortgage loan current, or how do I get in good standing with my mortgage loan coming out of forbearance. Despite there being nothing untoward about it, despite the fact they've always paid their bills on time, they find themselves in this situation where they can't pay their debt. And despite their best efforts and really valiantly trying to do so, they are stuck between a rock and a hard place, and they don't want to move. They want to keep their home. This is not your fault. You have done the right thing. But you do need to, buck up and really get your back up and get ready to get into this fight to save your home, because it's not going to be automatically granted that you're going to get a modification, especially if you have a private lender, especially if you have a relatively robust interest rate. And right now, refinancing is a very difficult challenge, even for those who are up to date on all their payments, given the interest rate environment. So for all those reasons, I'm in your corner. And if you have any questions that you want to put in the comments, I will answer all of them. And if you want to give me a call, my contact information is on the page. There's different ways to contact us depending on where you're watching this video. But the comments work just fine. And I'll be happy to steer you in the right direction and give you whatever information I can to make sure you get out of this all right, save your home, and that all is well that ends well. Thank you so much for watching.